The following is a Hoop Ball presentation. Welcome to the Fantasy NBA Today podcast.
I'm all out of sorts, folks. I'm sorry about that. I'm all out of sorts. I think it's Wednesday. Pretty sure it's Wednesday. It's been a strange week, as you guys all know. Welcome to Fantasy NBA Today. I am Dan Besbris. This is, of course, as always, hasn't changed, won't change, a hoop ball presentation. Your one-stop shop for all things NBA news, fantasy, and otherwise. We cover it all, man. We cover fantasy, we cover reality, we cover gambling, and that'll actually be in our rundown for today's podcast. I do want to start the show by reminding everybody that yesterday's podcast was about a 20-minute description on how to get involved in hoop ball, reader, listener, and pro leagues. We got a few ways you can do it. Just going to remind you here at the beginning of today's pod. Number one, you can tweet at me and at Ball with Neil. My good buddy Neil Rochlani, he will be organizing who gets into which league this season. It was just, with all the million things I had going on, it was just one too many, and he stepped up again. Neil and Adrian, man, those guys are my little heroes right now. So follow at Ball with Neil, follow at Dan Besbris on Twitter, send us a tweet, let us know what league you'd like to be in. We have cash, roto, cash head-to-head, free roto, and free head-to-head leagues available. It is all through Fantrax. It is all with other hoop ball listeners, readers, and pros. They're going to be great. Last year I mentioned I think we had about 120 total teams, I think, which was pretty awesome considering first year ever. Massive turnout on year one. I know other websites have more. We'll catch them. Fear not. And this year, I think in, what are we at, a few days here, we've had them open. We're more than halfway to that number already. And August just started a few hours ago. We'll have these open until basically the end of September, I would think. So we got like 2 more months where people can filter their way into the listener leagues. I know a lot of folks don't really pay attention to that type of stuff until Yahoo opens theirs. They're kind of the gold standard, right? Even if you don't like their interface that much. I do. I happen to prefer Yahoo to ESPN and Fantrax, and I know that sometimes puts me in the minority on that type of deal. But I also know that a lot of folks out there, the slightly more casual, those of you listening right now are the true diehards. You guys are the loons. You're the degenerates like me, like all of us here at Hoop Ball. But there's a huge contingent of fantasy basketball players, enthusiasts that do listen to podcasts and do read the websites, but don't really pay attention in June and July and even most of August. And then all of a sudden, they get that automated email from their Yahoo account that says, hey, fantasy basketball is back. Renew your league. They renew their league, and then they start checking out all the shows again. So there's going to be a big influx of people hopping into these leagues soon. I'm going to continue to remind everybody to do it, and I'm going to continue to remind everybody how to do it. So that was method number one. You can follow at Ball with Neil and at Dan Besbris. Send us a tweet. Let us know which type of league you'd like to be in, and Neil will get you placed. Method number two is to go to the Hoop Ball Facebook page. That's facebook.com/hoopballhoops. And you can reply to the most recent post on that one. Let us know what type of league you'd be in. And arguably the easiest method is a forum post. That's open right now. I've tweeted about it. If you follow me on Twitter, you can get to it that way. You can go to hoop-ball.com, click on the forums tab, and choose the Hoop Ball Leagues heading that I started. Make sure it's the one that Dan Besbris started. And just post in there, and Neil will get you placed as well. I think the only thing we require is an email address so that we can make sure to get a hold of you for all league communications and other stuff. All right, so get used to that. I'm going to be doing it at the beginning of most shows over the next little bit. Today's lead story is not fantasy related. Today's lead story is that the NBA has partnered with MGM Resorts as the official gaming partner of the National Basketball Association. This is a huge step forward. not because it actually changes the way all of us are going to be betting on games, but because symbolically it's showing how much the NBA has embraced this turn of events. And it is glorious. Again, it doesn't change a whole lot. The partnership itself is basically that MGM Resorts can use NBA logos and data streams. I think that's really the bulk of it. Names and faces and such. You guys remember, I don't know if many of you played a bunch of video games when you were younger. You hear my voice and immediately you're like, oh yeah, that dude definitely played video games. Well, I did, unabashedly so, play NBA games. And very early on, when the NBA, National Basketball Players Association, the NBPA, didn't have the rights to every single player, some of those games would have like 95% of NBA players in them, and then they would just make up weird names for the guys that were left out. I'm trying to think of, I think it was a PlayStation 1 game, so not the oldest NBA games out there. By the way, shout out Double Dribble, regular Nintendo. I think it was called In the Zone on PlayStation 1, NBA's In the Zone, where they had everybody but like Barkley and Jordan. So then they had fill-in players named Michael Player or like Charles Player, who had just the best stats in the game, but had no picture, couldn't use the name, couldn't use any of the movements. Basically, to me, this is what this agreement solidifies. And I know it's not a players' association thing. This is with the actual NBA. But it's allowing MGM to use whatever data and names and faces and places and all that stuff as they promote their partnership with the NBA. And as MGM stretches their betting net across many more states, individual states starting to embrace it. And I'm particularly enthused by the idea of them kind of stretching their net across the internet. I don't think many of us want to use the offshore stuff any more than we have to. So far, Delaware, New Jersey, and Mississippi have all legalized sports betting, and you can bet they're not going to be alone. And there really isn't a massive political side to it. You know, there's like Delaware, New Jersey, those are both far left states. Mississippi, pretty far to the right. It just, the people want what the people want, and it's a beautiful thing. Apolitical right now. It's weird, actually. So anyway, in terms of this deal, what it means is that the NBA's behind it. What it means is that all of the time we spend on this podcast talking about sports betting over the course of an NBA season, in addition to fantasy sports, is going to become more and more relevant because it's going to become more and more mainstream. It's not going to be a niche market. People are going to want to learn how to bet on things, and we're happy to be a source of that. By all accounts, and I tried to watch some of the Adam Silver press conference about this partnership with MGM, they will also be offering their data feed to other casinos, to other sort of casino property owners as well. So it's not exclusivity other than to call themselves the official gaming partner. The NBM will also be promoting the NBA, I should say, will also be promoting MGM Resorts in various capacities as well. So again, this is really more symbolic than anything else. It's when I worked as a media relations person in minor league baseball, in addition to broadcasting, this is what you'd just simply call a cross-promotional deal. Supposedly something like $25 million is changing hands, and to those of us who make far less than that, that sounds like a lot of money. But for the NBA and for sports gambling, $25 million is a drop in the bucket. I mean, just literally a huge Scrooge McDuck-size money bin bucket, and it's one coin. That's nothing. And that's $25 million over 3 years is what ESPN reported. That is really nothing. I mean, you guys know how much money gets bet on things, right? Like, look at football games. Billions and billions and billions of dollars. So this is good. This is just another sign that the NBA is leaning into the direction that things are moving in the country, in the sports betting landscape, and that's good for us because we want to be a part of that. We as people, forget hoopball. I'm not talking about the organization. I mean, well, yes, we talk about it here at Hoopball because it's a real thing, but just as people, I love sports betting. I have for many years. I ran a sports betting podcast for 3 years. One of the first ever. Might have been the first ever. I don't know if I could ever prove it. So this is a good thing. This is another step in the right direction. What else happened in the NBA over the last couple of days? This is really an interesting time because the NBA stories are all these sort of big picture things, with the exception of two. Let's talk about the two little picture things, and then let's talk about one more big picture thing, and that'll be today's pod. Tristan Thompson reportedly decking Draymond Green at an ESPYs after party. Well, that's fun. Roughly 2 weeks, slightly more, I think. Roughly 2 weeks after the ESPYs after party hosted by LeBron James, where phones were not allowed. Supposedly, Draymond Green went up to Tristan Thompson to apologize for their scrum in the NBA Finals. Tristan said no. Draymond tried again, and Tristan socked him in the mug. Will there be any ramifications? It doesn't sound like it. Supposedly, the players went back to just enjoying the party afterwards, so I'm doubting, it was a close-fisted, bloody nose kind of thing. But that's pretty good to know that these guys actually do. Some of them still hate one another off the court. So that was stupid, but I felt like I needed to mention it because, NBA news. Here's the other small ticket item. Jerry Colangelo is talking about his son, Brian. It's what we've always wanted, right? Daddies talking about their kids and their high-profile jobs. Nepotism. I'm going to use this story, I'm warning you right now, as a soapbox moment to rant about nepotism in the business world. But apparently, Jerry Colangelo went on Sirius XM's NBA radio yesterday to talk about his time as a special advisor with the 76ers, which is a job that's ending at the end of this year. And he said it was unfortunate, quote, unfortunate, a tough year for Brian under the circumstances to lose the job over nothing that he did. That is the quote, over nothing that he did. And this is why, by the way, all of you out there who are wildly overqualified for jobs can't get them. Because Jerry Colangelo's got them all. I don't have any individual beef with these two guys. We joke here at Hoopball about how the Colangelos were basically messing up the 76ers by not playing guys that should have gotten playing time, by trading for dudes like Trevor Booker and then immediately releasing them because, it's a dumb trade. My issue is just across the sports landscape. Can we stop just giving jobs to the kids of people who have other jobs? Can we give some other people a chance? I was actually affected by this at one point in my broadcasting career. My wife went to medical school at the University of Michigan. Many of you have heard me say that on this podcast. That's right. A doctor agreed to marry my lanky, nerdy ass. Well, anyway, when I moved out there, I was connected with some folks for a minor league baseball team about 2.5 hours away. And I'm not going to bring up a team name because, again, this is not me trying to call anybody out. I went through a whole interview process. It seemed like I was about to be hired to be a TV broadcaster for a minor league baseball team. That's a pretty sweet gig because there just aren't that many of those. And at the last minute, ownership stepped in and brought his nephew on, a kid with zero broadcast experience, fresh out of college, and the job disappeared. Why? Simply because I wasn't related. And that's stupid because I was way more qualified than this other person. Empirically so. I had a professional broadcasting job before. And, I listened to the guy's stuff. I was better. I don't think I'm better than everybody. Not by a long shot. There are a lot of broadcasters out there that are way better than I am. But I was better than this kid. He was terrible. So it happens everywhere. I'm sure almost all of you listening have run into this at some point. And the Colangelos, poster children for nepotism gone awry. Not only did his son do something stupid and get fired for it, Jerry doesn't think he did anything. He's done some nice stuff in his career, Jerry Colangelo has. The dads often do. Dr. Jerry Buss, for instance. But it's time, guys. It's time. Let's hire people because they're good. And finally, what I would call a big-ticket item. It has no fantasy ramifications. It has no betting ramifications. In fact, it's something that, if this were the middle of the NBA season, we probably wouldn't even mention on this podcast. But I did want to take 5 to 10 minutes to talk about what LeBron James has done in Ohio. I think you can sit on either side of the political aisle and appreciate that LeBron James opening the I Promise School was a fantastic achievement. For those that didn't see the news, LeBron James opened a public school in Akron, Ohio that offers free tuition, free uniforms, free bicycles, and helmets. That's right, some neurologist got their voice in there. Free transportation within 2 miles, breakfast, lunch, and snacks, a food pantry for families, GED and job placement services for parents, and guaranteed tuition to the University of Akron for every single student who graduates from that school. I admit, I am a little bit emotional these days. You heard me say it on yesterday's podcast. Been dealing with some stuff. But this is the kind of story that almost can bring a tear to my eye. The entirety of the NBA getting behind LeBron in this opening. I mean, how many NBA players tweeted about it? You saw Steph Curry tweet about it, Chris Paul, Dwayne Wade, IT, obviously LeBron himself. I think Michelle Obama was getting behind it. Most of the reporters. This is one of those things that's just so magically positive in a time where there's a lot of negativity. And I'm not one of those, okay, fine, I am a little bit of a hippy-dippy sort. You guys know I went to Berkeley. But I'm not one of those guys that needs to talk about, internalizing everything and turning everything into a positive. A lot of things do suck. Trying not to admit that is lying to yourself. But to me, this is, I hope, the start of something amazing. Because if one man can do it, then another man can do it. And I really hope that this has almost like a snowball effect, where other folks, but NBA stars, Hollywood stars, football, baseball, business people, anybody that's in a position of extraordinary wealth and power should be using that for these types of projects. This is something truly tangible. So congratulations to LeBron James. This is awesome. Go out there and read some more about it. This is truly good. And that makes me happy. I am anxiously awaiting the release of a handful of things, because then we're going to have a lot of podcasts to do on them. ESPN put out their what they called way too early 2018-2019 fantasy roto rankings. They are 8-cat. So we're not going to be breaking those down. Sorry. That's just sort of not my thing. But someone could. As soon as Yahoo puts out their rankings, obviously we're going to be dissecting those in a big way. Another thing that I really can't wait for are NBA season win totals. Ooh, that's going to be a good one. Lines are not out yet. Though we do have futures available, which to me is a little bit less fun because with season win totals, you can look at every single team, and there's usually value on the, I guess what you kind of call the lesser-known franchises, the ones that are not making these plays for the giant free agents. With futures, you can wipe about 90% of the teams off the board right away. You know, that kind of leaves you like 3 to 5 to actually pick from. But quickly here, a mention of the futures numbers. I think we'll probably take some time on a future show to break them down a little bit more. The favorite right now, of course, is Golden State. They are at minus 150 to win the NBA championship this coming year. So you're not touching that. You are just not touching that in any way, shape, or form. You have a couple of teams that are floating around outside of that number. Boston is at plus 600. Houston plus 700. The Lakers are at plus 800. Philly 1,200. Toronto 1,600. Utah, by the way, plus 6,600. Oklahoma City plus 4,000. Your best chances here are to pick an Eastern Conference team since they no longer have to go through LeBron James. So a Boston or a Toronto or a Philadelphia, whoever you think is going to come out of the East. Maybe they surprise somebody. Maybe someone from the West gets hurt. Your other options are to look at a team like OKC because they've made all these moves, but the coverage of them has been fairly negative. Utah, who looked really good for stretches this last year, and those two teams play a different type of basketball, which to me makes them a little bit more frightening for a team at the top, like a Golden State or a Houston. It's hard to win that many championships in a row. It's hard to play that many games in a row. So you look at those types of teams and who can get over the top? If you break it down a little bit more individually, you can see the Eastern Conference, who to come out of the East. Boston is the favorite at minus 110. Philly at plus 300, Raptors at plus 325, so there's a little bit of value there. You've also got Milwaukee kind of sitting at the periphery at plus 1,800. I'd be pretty surprised if one of those three teams we mentioned before isn't your representative from the East. Now, out West, this is a little bit more interesting because Golden State is such a prohibitive favorite at minus 312, which, by the way, you know that if you think Golden State's going to come out of the West, then you've got that slightly cheaper price to actually win the championship. You have these other teams in the Western Conference where maybe you catch the Warriors napping or tired a little bit. Houston at plus 500, Lakers plus 7, Utah plus 3,000 to come out of the West. Minnesota plus 3,000, OKC 3,000. You've got all those that are actually kind of intriguing. And believe it or not, a lot of these websites have actually broken the futures down by division. Who's going to win the Atlantic Division? That's the one that I think I'd avoid. Boston, Philly, and Toronto are all in the Atlantic Division. The Central, that'll probably come down to Indiana and Milwaukee. I don't know why Detroit is actually even in the discussion. Southeast, Washington right now is the favorite over Miami. What about out West? The Pacific Division, the Lakers. Not the favorite, of course. The Golden State Warriors, the easy ones. That's going to be a tough one to overcome. The Northwest, that's your wide open race. Right now, the favorite out of the Northwest is Utah by a hair, plus 225. Oklahoma City at plus 250. Denver plus 255. Minnesota plus 375. And Portland at plus 500. By the way, Portland won that division last year. Yeah, I agree, though. They shouldn't be the favorite. And what about the Southwest? Or what I like to call the Texas League. Houston at minus 455. San Antonio plus 500. Dallas plus 1,800. Yeesh. New Orleans plus 750. And Memphis at plus 3,000. So you've got all these weird opportunities floating around, but I tend to dislike futures unless you're looking to try to middle them at some point along the way. And that's really hard to do when you're talking about an entire league. We talked about middling in the playoffs, where you were just betting two sides of a same slightly shorter term outcome. This is way too long to have that kind of money on the line unless you really truly believe in what you're doing. A lot of websites don't have those individual conferences and divisions available, but we did have one look at them. In terms of, to win the championship, if you're betting Golden State, you're not doing it at the right time. They are the prohibitive favorite. What we need is for Golden State to go on a little bit of a losing kick, or for someone like Houston, did it last year, to overtake them. That's when things become more juicy. Remember, we had Houston overtake the Warriors. Dubs came into the playoffs at a fairly affordable price, and we said, this is your moment. If you're thinking about it, now's the time. That's the only way to bet this stuff, is to wait for your moment. So, is there a team on the board that has a legitimate shot to win the NBA championship that's undervalued right now? If anybody, it would have to be a team like Oklahoma City or Utah. Utah in particular at plus 6,600 right now. They opened at plus 7,500. It's bounced around a little bit. Some places it's higher, some it's lower. I guess we can just talk about the opening line. Plus 7,500 is the number for Utah when that line opened. Oklahoma City has been taking some money. Their number has pretty consistently come down from the opening line. They opened at 7,500. It's closer to plus 4,000 at most places. Obviously, the Lakers are overvalued. Houston might actually be a tiny bit undervalued, believe it or not, right now. It's not great odds at plus 700 roughly on the Rockets, but they've had, by all accounts, kind of a crummy offseason, and I think people have discounted them, thinking last year was kind of their one bullet. What about out east? I think out east, pretty much all of those teams are overvalued. Not one of them has really separated itself from the pack. Philly didn't really get any better, unless you want to talk about individual growth, right? They need their young guys to improve, but I don't think anybody thinks they're going to get past Boston. Toronto, you could certainly argue, got better with the addition of Kawhi Leonard, provided he's healthy. Problem is here, you're probably not betting Boston because they are the favorite to come out of the East. You're probably not betting Toronto because what if Kawhi Leonard's not fully healthy? And I don't know if you're betting Philadelphia because they were wildly overvalued by the end of the season last year and then showed some inexperience when it came to playoff stuff. And they didn't get the free agents they wanted, and they lost their general manager, and they made sort of a lot of weird moves. So I don't really like the Eastern Conference teams right now, unless you think a team like Milwaukee or Indiana can surprise somebody, because their odds are, well, pretty steep. Milwaukee at plus 10,000, Indiana at plus 12,500. I'd give Indiana a better shot to get over the hump than Milwaukee. I still haven't seen enough from the Bucks to believe that they can play the defense to win in the postseason. Maybe that changes. Maybe Brook Lopez protecting the rim changes things, but I just don't think that they have that enough on that side of the ball. I would say Indiana at plus 12,500. I mean, considering you could put like $5 on that, and it would be an interesting wager. They're a bit undervalued right now out east with an actual outside shot at making some noise. I think people are going to tell you to bet Washington, but I think they're going to be terrible. And then again, out west, you look at a team like Utah, to me, is your undervalued team in the Western Conference. So we'll keep an eye on this stuff. That's just the thought right now. And then Houston, as I said before. Oh, I can't wait until season win totals are officially out. I know there was some British sports book that put out numbers at the beginning of July, but almost none of those are relevant anymore, and I doubt they were up for more than about 15 minutes. So if you're talking to somebody who claims to know where they can get those numbers, I'm not sure that they're being truthful with you. They may have grabbed at them for the 15 seconds that they could. But most sports books don't really have much going on in terms of available wagers other than championship futures. I know 5 Dimes has a Warriors bet, or you can take the field in that one at plus 148. Not sure I'd do that. You can take the field against the Boston Celtics at minus 550. That's not a terrible wager. So there's some weird stuff out there. Would love to take some time here on the next couple of weeks. We'll break it down on the pod. Let's wrap it up on that one. I know I said we were going to keep this thing on the shorter side, and I think we're still relatively brief by all accounts. We got into the betting stuff. It's going to be fun. That was really the main purpose of today's show, but also to once again highlight the cool things that LeBron James is doing in the hopes that all of us can get behind doing things for humanity. Let's be good. That's the theme of August. Let's be good. I am Dan Besbris. Join the Hoop Ball Reader and Listener Leagues. Once again, I remind you, you can just tweet at us, at Dan Besbris and at Ball with Neil. We'll get you placed in Roto or cash, or excuse me, Roto or head-to-head, free or cash leagues. We've got them all available, and we'll keep them open for a long time. I will be on the podcast with Neil Rochlani for tomorrow's show. We can talk a bit more about how the listener leagues are going, if he's been able to keep things organized so far, or if it's caused his brain to blow a gasket. And then on Friday, Neil and Adrian will continue their tour of the conferences. Pretty cool stuff those guys have been working on while I've been away from podcasting for a few days. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a wonderful Wednesday. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
This has been a Hoop Ball presentation.